I'm tired, I can't bear it anymore, it's too much for me. 20 winters alone, hearing only the wind and the howls of beasts in the night, cast out by my own people, rejected by the whites, condemned to live as a shadow. I swore I would never need any woman, that I would die without asking anything of anyone. I made solitude my weapon, I made silence my shield. But tonight the storm carries the scent of blood, and a call I cannot ignore. Something is coming, I know it, thought Tasunka. You are my first woman, said the solitary virgin Sioux Indian to the pregnant widow who begged for shelter in his cave. Imagine a night in 1831 when rain fell like heaven's own tears upon a forest heavy with secrets. Think of what it must have been like for a pregnant woman, bloodied and desperate, wandering through the dense American wilderness in search of salvation. And now imagine a man who had lived decades without the touch of a woman, cut off from the world, yet in a single moment would change the destiny of two forsaken souls. This is a tale no settlement would dare tell aloud, a story of redemption born in the silence of the forest. Just as the rarest seeds take root in the harshest soil, the most powerful stories are born in the most wounded hearts. If you believe in the transforming power of true love, subscribe to our channel to discover more narratives that touch the soul and reveal hidden beauty in the most unexpected places. The rain came down like a divine curse upon the thick woods. Serafina Calder, staggering between dark trunks, felt each step as a silent scream of pain drowned out by the fury of the storm. Her left hand clutched the swelling belly where life and death fought their hidden war. Her right hand groped blindly for branches, rocks, anything to keep her from collapsing into the cold mud. The blood had started 3 miles back when the last horse threw her to the ground and vanished into the night. Now, under the wrath of the tempest, Serafina felt as though the very heavens rejected her. Her chestnut hair, once tied in a respectable braid, hung in soaked strands across her pale, battered face. It was 1831, and the world had no place for women like her. Widow of a cruel man, carrying the child of her tormentor, cast out of the homestead like diseased cattle. The townsfolk had turned their faces when she passed the last houses, as if misfortune were contagious. Even the beggars had refused to share the dry corners of their porches. But the forest had accepted her. For 3 days, Serafina wandered aimlessly beneath the trees, gnawing on roots she'd known since childhood and drinking from icy streams. Each sunrise surprised her still alive. Each nightfall, she prayed for a quick death if dawn would not come again. That night the storm came like a starving beast. Lightning ripped the sky in glowing wounds, and the wind howled through the canopy like the voices of all the dead she had ever known. Serafina stumbled over a root and fell to her knees in the soaked earth, her belly seizing in spasms that made her moan. That was when she saw the light. Not fire, but a golden glow flickering among the rocks, soft as a firefly, steady as a star. Lifting her head, hair plastered to her face, Serafina saw the opening, a cave dug into the rock face, its entrance shielded by deer hide swaying with the wind. She didn't think. She crawled. Each yard weighed more than the last. Each hand's breadth left blood heavier between her legs. But the golden glow beckoned her like a siren's song, and Serafina pressed on until her fingers brushed the cave's edge. Then the hide moved. A man emerged from the opening. No, a ghost made flesh. His skin was bronze like sun-scorched earth. His black hair fell to his broad shoulders, and his dark eyes carried a stillness Serafina had never seen in any man. Bare-chested, his torso was painted with red markings like ancient runes, and he looked at her without haste, without judgment. Serafina tried to speak, but only coughed. She tried to hold herself up, but her arms gave way, and she collapsed sideways in the mud as the world spun. The man said nothing. He simply lifted her in his arms as though she were a child, carrying her into the cave with the care of someone handling a rare flower. Inside, the cave was unexpectedly welcoming. A small fire warmed the air without filling it with smoke. Animal pelts lined the ground. Clay pots held seeds, herbs, and wild honey. On the walls, ancient drawings told stories only the winds could read. The man laid her upon a bed of dry leaves and soft hides, covering her with a cougar skin still warm. The heat seeped into her frozen bones like divine mercy. For the first time in days, she did not shiver. He knelt beside her, studying her with the same attention he would give a wounded creature found in the woods. Dipping a cloth into warm water, he began to wipe the blood from her face with the precision of experience and the tenderness of a first encounter. Serafina gazed at him through wet lashes. He looked to be in his 30s, but something about him was ancient, as if he bore the wisdom of many lives. His hands, roughened by survival, moved with the delicacy of a healer. When he brushed hair from her forehead, a shiver coursed through her that had nothing to do with cold. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice rasping like sandpaper. He stopped cleaning her wounds and looked straight at her. For a moment, silence reigned, broken only by the crackle of the fire and the patter of rain outside the cave. Then, for the first time, he spoke. "You are my first woman." It was not desire she heard in his deep, measured voice. It was destiny, as if the universe had finally placed two missing pieces where they belonged. Serafina closed her eyes and slept in peace for the first time she could remember. She woke to the scent of herbs cooking. At first, she thought she was dreaming. It had been months since she awoke to food prepared with care. Then the memories of the storm, the blood, the cave, the man who had saved her, came rushing back. Opening her eyes slowly, afraid it was all fever's delusion, she saw him there. Seated by the fire, he stirred a clay pot with the patience of someone who owned all the time in the world. The golden firelight cast dancing shadows across his bare torso, and Serafina noticed for the first time the scars tracing his arms, claw marks, old burns, cuts that spoke of survival. He knew she was awake before she moved. Turning his head toward her, Serafina met those dark eyes again, eyes that seemed to see beneath the surface of all things. "How do you feel?" he asked, his voice low, careful. Subscribe to our channel to discover more narratives that touch the soul and reveal hidden beauty in the most unexpected places. Serafina tried to sit up, but sharp pain in her back made her groan. The man left the pot instantly and came to her side, offering his strong arm for support. "Slowly," he murmured. "The baby is still fighting to stay." Her words slipped out, half wonder, half gratitude. You know I'm pregnant." He helped her settle more comfortably among the pelts, placing cushions woven from soft fibers behind her back. "I know many things. The wind speaks, the animals whisper, the plants reveal their secrets." A pause. "And your body shouts that it carries life." Serafina instinctively touched her belly, feeling under her palm the faint movement that for days had both calmed and terrified her. He doesn't want to come yet?" "No." The man returned to the fire, filling a clay cup with the steaming liquid he had prepared. "But he is afraid. He senses the world outside is not safe." He held out the cup. The liquid was amber-colored, smelling of roots, honey, and something Serafina couldn't name, perhaps hope. "My name is Tasunka Wapasha," he said, as she drank the warm broth that soothed her empty stomach. "And you? What do they call you?" "Serafina," she replied, the name sounding strange on her own tongue. It had been so long since anyone asked. They only shouted woman, whore, or wretch. Serafina called her. Tasunka repeated her name slowly, as though savoring each syllable. "Serafina," he murmured, "like a flower born in the desert." She almost smiled. "I don't know if I'm a flower. I think I'm more of a thorn." "Thorns have their beauty too," he answered, settling beside her. "And their purpose. They protect what is precious." Serafina studied his face as she drank. His features balanced strength and gentleness, a firm jaw yet soft lips, bold brows yet kind eyes. His masculinity was unlike any she had known, not imposing, not threatening, but steady as the trunk of an ancient tree. "How long have you lived here?" she asked. 20 winters, he replied, stoking the fire with a thin stick. "Perhaps 21. I lost count." "Alone?" "Yes." A pause. "Until today." Something shifted in her chest. Not the child, but a sensation she could not name. "Why alone?" He was slow to answer. When he did, his voice carried the weight of old wounds. "My people cast me out at 15 winters. They said I carried a woman's spirit in a man's body, because I never wanted women, never wanted war." He raised his eyes to her. "The white men rejected me because my skin is dark and my blood is wild. So I learned to live between two worlds belonging to neither." "And you never had a woman?" "No." The simplicity of his answer echoed in the cave like a sacred confession. Serafina finished the broth and returned the cup. For the first time since arriving, she truly saw herself. The torn dress, bare and wounded feet, disheveled hair. She must have looked like a ghost pulled from nightmares. "Why did you take me in?" she asked quietly. Tasunka rose and walked to one of the cave walls, where a necklace of small white teeth hung. He touched it with reverence, as though it were a relic. "My grandmother taught me that when the spirits send someone to our door, it means we must learn something." He turned to her. And you came in the storm as a message from the heavens. What message? He stepped closer, but stopped at a respectful distance, as though aware of the fear still living in her body. That perhaps I have spent too much time speaking only with the trees. Tears burned in Serafina's eyes, not of sorrow, but of something she had long forgotten, recognition. After years of being seen as aberration or property, at last someone looked at her as a person. And me, she asked, voice trembling. What message must I learn? Tasunka smiled for the first time since she had awakened. It was a small, almost timid smile, but it transformed his entire face. That not every man is an executioner. The silence that followed was not uncomfortable. It was like the pause between two notes, necessary for the melody to make sense. Serafina felt something within her, something clenched like a fist for years, begin to open slowly, like a cautious flower touched by the first ray of sun. Outside, the storm had passed, and the first birds began to sing. The days that followed drifted by like a golden dream. Serafina discovered that life in Tasunka's cave had its own rhythm, dictated not by bells or masters' shouts, but by the sun's journey, the birds' songs, and the simple needs of body and soul. Tasunka rose before dawn, leaving silently to check snares, gather berries and herbs, fetch fresh water from the nearby creek. At first, Serafina tried to rise with him, driven by years of conditioning that made her feel guilty for resting, but he, with firm yet gentle gestures, laid her back down. You are healing, he would say, covering her with soft pelts, and so is the little one. Let me care for you both. It was the first time in her life someone had tended to Serafina without demanding anything in return. In the mornings, while he was gone, she explored the cave with growing curiosity. Every object seemed placed with purpose. Pots arranged by size and use, tools hung in precise order, medicinal plants drying in neat bundles from the ceiling. There was harmony in the simplicity that calmed something deep inside her spirit. But it was the drawings on the walls that fascinated her most. Made with natural pigments, red ochre, black charcoal, white clay, they told stories without words. Men hunting, women planting, children playing, animals running free. And there were symbols she couldn't decipher. Spirals, interlocking circles, figures that seemed to dance among the stars. When Tasunka returned, he always brought something. Sweet fruit, nourishing roots, fragrant herbs, sometimes a small fish from the stream. He cooked with the same patience and care he gave to all things, seasoning with herbs he knew by heart, tending the fire like a fragile child, tasting the food before offering it to her. Where did you learn to cook like this? Serafina asked one afternoon, savoring a stew of wild roots that tasted as if the gods themselves had prepared it. My grandmother, he said, stirring the pot slowly. She told me cooking is a way of loving, that when we prepare food with care, we nourish not only the body but also the soul of the one who eats. Serafina felt her chest tighten with unexpected emotion. What was she like? His face softened with tender memory. Small as a sparrow, strong as a cougar. She could speak with plants, heal sickness of body and soul, predict rain by the insect's flight. He smiled, and she made the best corn cakes in the whole camp. What happened to her? She died of grief when they cast me out. I was her only grandson. His voice dropped lower. I tried to return and bury her, but they wouldn't let me near the village. I buried my heart with her that day. Serafina instinctively reached out, laying her hand gently on his arm. It was the first time she touched him of her own will, and both seemed startled by the gesture. I'm sorry, she murmured. Tasunka glanced at her hand on his arm, then back into her eyes. Thank you. As the days passed, Serafina felt her body growing stronger. The wounds on her feet healed, the bleeding had stopped completely, and her belly swelled with renewed health. But more important than her physical healing was something happening within, as if broken parts of her soul were slowly being pieced together. She began helping with small tasks, peeling roots, arranging herbs, keeping the fire alive. Tasunka never asked for her help, but accepted it with quiet gratitude whenever she offered. They worked side by side, developing a private language of gestures, glances, and comfortable silences. One morning, while Serafina braided river reeds into baskets, Tasunka returned carrying something unusual, small white teeth, perfectly cleaned. What are those? She asked. Groundhog teeth, he answered, sitting beside her. For making a necklace. For you. For the baby. He began piercing the teeth with a bone awl, his movements precise and careful. My grandmother said groundhog teeth protect against evil spirits. especially when given with love. Serafina stopped braiding and watched him work. His large, calloused hands handled the tiny teeth with almost feminine delicacy. There was something deeply moving in seeing this strong man crafting a protective charm for a child not his own. "Why?" she asked, her voice thick. He looked up. "Why what? Why do this? Why care for us? You owe us nothing." He paused, staring at her for a long moment. Then he spoke with soul-piercing simplicity. "Because you came to me broken, and I know what it is to be broken. Because you arrived lost, and I know that path. Because—" He hesitated, then continued softly, "because the first thing I felt when I saw you in the rain was not pity, it was recognition." Tears stung Serafina's eyes. Recognition? As if I had spent my whole life waiting for you without knowing it. Sometimes the most meaningful moments come disguised in simplicity. Just as Tasunka recognized in Serafina the missing piece of his solitary life, you too may find special connections in the most unexpected places. If this story is touching your heart, subscribe to our channel. We have many more tales of encounters that change destinies and prove true love can be born even in the deepest loneliness. That night, Serafina fell asleep to the sound of Tasunka finishing the necklace. And for the first time in years, she dreamed of more than survival. She dreamed of a future. The necklace was finished on a golden afternoon, sunlight filtering through the forest canopy. Tasunka held it to the light at the cave's entrance, examining each tooth polished smooth, each knot tied with care. Serafina watched, seated on soft pelts, her right hand circling the belly, where life now grew with renewed strength. "It's beautiful," she murmured, admiring his work. Tasunka came closer, kneeling beside her. "May I?" he asked, indicating her belly. She hesitated only an instant. No man had ever touched her belly with tenderness, only with possession, brutality, or clinical indifference. But something in his eyes was different. Reverence, as if he approached a sacred altar. She nodded. His hands rested on the fabric of her dress, broad and warm, covering nearly all of her rounded belly. For a moment they stayed like that, she watching his focused face, he feeling the life beating beneath his palms. "He is strong," Tasunka whispered, genuine wonder in his voice. "His heart drums like a war beat." "How do you know it's a boy?" "The spirits tell me." He smiled, that small, rare smile that transformed his whole face. "And the way you carry him. Girls rest more to the sides, boys more forward, like warriors ready to strike the world." Serafina laughed for the first time since arriving at the cave, a soft, musical sound that surprised them both. "And if the spirits are wrong? Then we will love a warrior maiden instead of a warrior." The natural way he said "we will love" stirred something deep in Serafina's chest. It was not a promise, not a declaration, simply the acknowledgement of a fact already alive, as if love had sprouted between them as naturally as the plants he tended. Tasunka placed the necklace over her belly, the small white teeth gleaming against the dark fabric of her dress. "Now he is protected," he murmured, with ritual seriousness. Serafina touched the necklace, feeling the comforting weight of teeth worked with such devotion. "And you? Who protects you?" The question seemed to catch him off guard. Tasunka pulled back slightly, sitting cross-legged on the ground again. "I need no protection. I've learned to care for myself. Everyone needs protection sometimes." "Perhaps." He stirred the fire, coaxing lazy flames to life. "But I learned early on the only person I can trust completely is myself." Serafina studied his profile, lit by the golden firelight. There were scars on his face too. A small one on his chin, another on his forehead. Marks of a life lived without protection, without softness, without the comfort of knowing someone cared enough to stop the falls. "It must have been so lonely," she said quietly. "It was." He turned to her. "Until you came." Their conversation was broken by a sudden movement in Serafina's belly. She gasped, clutching both hands to her womb. "Are you all right?" Tasunka rushed closer, alert. "He's moving so much." Serafina smiled, though worry edged her voice. "More than usual." Tasunka placed his hand once more on her belly, closing his eyes in concentration. For a long moment he was utterly still, as if listening to something only he could hear. "He is dancing," he said at last, opening his eyes with wonder. "He is happy, happy. He feels safe. He feels he has a family." The word family hung in the air between them like both blessing and promise. Serafina felt her chest tighten, not from pain, but from an emotion so pure and fierce it almost hurt. "Tasunka," she began, but the words failed. He understood without her finishing. "I feel it too," he murmured. I feel it too. That night, for the first time, they slept closer. They did not touch. There was still caution, still fear woven into both their bodies. But the distance between their beds of pelts grew smaller. Serafina drifted into sleep, listening to Tazunka's steady breathing, feeling more protected than if she were behind stone walls. In the days that followed, they developed small rituals, as precious as jewels. Tazunka began waking her each morning with warm herbal tea. Serafina combed his long hair with a wooden comb he had carved. He told stories of his grandmother during meals. She hummed songs her mother had taught her before death stole her away. It was a simple life, almost primitive by the world's measure, but it held a completeness Serafina had never known. Nothing was missing, nothing was wasted, everything was exactly enough. One morning, as Serafina wove a small blanket for the baby, Tazunka returned from the woods with seeds she didn't recognize. "What are those?" she asked. "Apple seeds," he said, showing them in his palm. "I'll plant them outside, near the entrance. The tree will take years to grow, but when it does, it will give shade and fruit for generations." Serafina smiled, touching one seed with her fingertip. "You're thinking about the future. For the first time in 20 years, Tazunka admitted. "I'm planting hope." And while he dug small holes in the damp earth before the cave, Serafina watched, one hand on the necklace of groundhog teeth, the other resting on the belly, where not only a child was growing, but also the promise that some stories could have happy endings. The first touch happened by chance. One morning, as Serafina reached for herbs drying high on the cave's rafters, she stretched on tiptoe until she lost her balance. Tazunka appeared behind her at the exact moment she fell, his arms circling her waist, his broad chest a steady wall against her back. For an instant, they stayed like that. She pressed against him, feeling the heat of his body through the thin fabric of her dress, he breathing slowly near her ear, his large hands resting protectively over her rounded belly. "Thank you," Serafina whispered, but she did not step away immediately. "Careful," Tazunka murmured, also unmoving. "You carry more than yourself now." It was the first embrace of Serafina's life that asked nothing in return. That carried no fear, no pain, no expectation. It was simply protection, care, affection without a name. When they finally parted, both avoided each other's eyes the rest of the morning, as though needing silence to process what had happened between their bodies. But something had changed. From that day, touch became more frequent, more natural. Tazunka's hand guiding her across slick stones when they fetched water, her fingers smoothing a stray feather from his hair, his shoulder serving as her pillow when she dozed in the afternoon sun, her palm resting on his arm when they spoke by the fire. These were not touches of passion, not yet. They were touches of recognition, of two people learning to trust bodies the world had wounded too often. One afternoon, as Serafina sewed small clothes for the baby, Tazunka returned from the forest with seeds the color of blood. Red berries gleamed in his hand like wet rubies. "What are they for?" she asked, watching him prepare a thick paste in a clay bowl. "Protection," he said, mixing the berries with clean water until the paint turned smooth. "And beauty, too." Serafina frowned in curiosity. "Beauty?" Tazunka stepped closer, the bowl in one hand, his fingers already stained red on the other. "May I?" he asked, gesturing to her face. She hesitated. All her life, men had touched her face only to harm, slaps, pinches, rough hands leaving marks. But Tazunka's fingers waited with patience, without pressure, without demand. She nodded. The first line he drew stretched across her forehead, temple to temple, delicate as a painter's brush, then small circles on her cheeks. Curved lines flowing from the corners of her eyes like tears of joy. "What do they mean?" she whispered, feeling his fingers glide over her skin with reverence, as if touching sacred art. "This line on your forehead means wisdom earned through pain." He dipped his finger again. "The circles are for fertility and protection of the life you carry. And these," he traced the curved lines, "these are for tears turned into strength." When he finished, Tazunka stepped back to admire his work. His gaze lingered on every mark before meeting hers. "Now you look as you always were," he said, his voice low, intense. "A warrior, a mother, a sacred woman." Serafina touched her own face, feeling the paint still damp beneath her fingertips. She had never felt sacred, only used, discarded, broken. But in Tazunka's eyes, she saw a reflection of herself she had never known, strong, beautiful, worthy. "Your turn," she said, taking the bowl from his hands. He seemed surprised. My turn? If I am a warrior, so are you. She dipped her fingers in the red paint, and warriors need protection as much as warrior women. This time it was he who hesitated, vulnerability flashing across his face like a passing shadow. It has been a long time since anyone. I know, Serafina interrupted softly. I know what it is to be untouched with kindness. She began with a vertical line down the center of his forehead, from his hairline to between his brows. Then horizontal strokes across his cheeks, like war scars painted in crimson, finally small dots around his eyes. And what do mine mean? Tasunka asked, his voice rougher than usual. The vertical line is for connection with the spirits who guide you. Serafina painted with care, focused. The marks on your cheeks are for all the battles you fought alone, and the dots, she lifted her eyes to meet his. The dots are for all the tears you never let fall, Twandis, but I can see them hidden inside. When she finished, they stared at one another, two survivors painted red, recognizing each other at last as equals, as partners, as something more they did not yet dare to name. It was Tasunka who broke the silence. Serafina, yes? May I touch your belly again, to feel how he is? This time she did not hesitate. She guided his hands to her belly, covering them with her own. Beneath their joined palms the baby stirred, and both smiled at once. He likes you, Serafina whispered. And I like him, Tasunka replied. And both of you. That night they slept even closer, their faces painted red as a silent promise that they had become each other's tribe. Captain Silas Murdane arrived on a morning heavy with low skies and storm-laden clouds, the air thick with the threat of rain. Serafina awoke to the sound of hooves trampling the ground outside the cave, men's voices barking orders, the clang of metal on metal that could only be swords leaving their scabbards. Her blood ran cold. Tasunka was already on his feet, alert as a wild beast sensing a predator. The muscles of his bare torso were tense, his nostrils flared, his eyes locked on the entrance where the deer-hide door swayed in the morning wind. Serafina Calder. The voice that split the air was authoritative, familiar, and made every fiber of her body tense with fear. I know you're in there, you damned harlot. Come out at once, or I'll send my men in to drag you out. Captain Silas Murdane, younger brother of her late husband, a man who had always looked at her with poorly disguised lust and undisguised contempt. Serafina knew he hadn't come simply to take her back. He had come to punish her for what he saw as betrayal to his brother's memory. Stay behind me, Tasunka whispered, placing himself between her and the entrance. No, Serafina struggled to rise, her heavy belly slowing her movements. He'll kill you if you hide me. Silas shows no mercy to an Indian. And I fear no white man. Serafina, the captain's voice grew louder. You have 3 minutes to come out. If you don't, I'll burn this cave with you and that savage inside. Serafina touched Tasunka's arm, feeling the corded muscle beneath her palm. Please, let me face him. You don't understand how these men think. Oh, I understand, Tasunka growled, his eyes burning with an old fury. I understand they think they can take what they want, destroy what they cannot control, and break what they cannot comprehend. Exactly why I must go. He won't stop until he has me, and you don't deserve to die because of me. Tasunka's gaze cut into her, pained and fierce. Do you think I could live knowing I let them take you? Before she could answer, the captain's voice roared again. 2 minutes. Serafina closed her eyes, drew in a deep breath, and made the decision that would change everything. I'm coming out, she shouted. But I come alone. Leave the Indian in peace, and he only gave me shelter from the rain. Serafina, no. Tasunka gripped her arm. Trust me, she whispered, covering his hand with hers. And if something goes wrong, take care of the baby. Promise me you'll protect him. Nothing will go wrong. Promise. Tasunka hesitated, then nodded gravely. I promise. Serafina pressed a quick kiss to his forehead, the first kiss they had ever shared, and walked toward the entrance. She pulled aside the hide door and stepped into the grey morning light. Captain Silas Murdane sat astride a black horse, flanked by 6 armed soldiers. He was a man in his 40s, with a neatly trimmed moustache, a spotless uniform, and small, cruel eyes. When he saw Serafina, a sadistic smile curled across his lips. Well, look at the respectable widow now. His eyes travelled over her simple dress, the heavy swell of her belly, her bare feet. Living like a wild animal, swollen with bastard seed painted like a pagan. Serafina lifted her chin, refusing to show the fear gnawing inside her. What do you want from me, Silas? What do I want? He dismounted slowly, every motion deliberate. I want you to come back and pay for what you've done. I want this child raised Christian, not as some savage's brat, and I want that Indian punished for corrupting a white woman. He did not corrupt me. He saved me." Silas stepped closer, and Serafina forced herself not to retreat. "Saved you?" He laughed, a harsh sound like scraping steel. "He turned you into a painted heathen, that's what. But don't worry. When we return, I'll see to it you're properly cleansed." "I'm not going back." The slap cracked across her face before she could brace herself, sending her stumbling. Pain flared hot across her cheek. That was when Tasunka appeared. He emerged from the cave like a storm-given flesh, bare-chested, his body painted in black and red war patterns Serafina had never seen. His hair was tied high with eagle feathers, and in his hands he held a fire-hardened spear, its tip sharpened to a razor's edge. "Take your hands off her," he said, his voice low, rumbling like thunder. The soldiers raised their weapons at once, but the captain lifted his hand, commanding them to wait. "So this is the savage who corrupted my sister-in-law," Silas sneered, circling Tasunka like a predator. "Doesn't look like much." Tasunka did not reply. He only stood beside Serafina, spear steady in his grip, eyes locked on the captain. "You know what your problem is, Indian," Silas continued, pacing slowly around them. "You think you can defy the natural order. You think a white widow of good stock can live shackled to a savage. The natural order," Tasunka said at last, his voice steady, "is to protect those who need protecting, to love those who deserve love, not to break what's already broken." Silas stopped and smirked. "Love? You think you love her?" He laughed again, cruel and sharp. "She's a whore, Indian. She carried her dead husband's child, fled her home like a thief, lived in the woods like an animal. And you think you love her?" "I do," Tasunka said simply. "I love her, and the child she carries." The silence that followed was taut as a bowstring ready to snap. Serafina's heart pounded so hard she thought they could all hear it. Silas drew his sword slowly, the steel hissing as it left the scabbard. "Then die for her." What happened next was too fast for thought, too slow for the heart. Silas struck first, the blade cutting through the air in a silver arc aimed at Tasunka's chest. But the Sioux warrior was ready. He rolled aside, the spear whirling in his hands, like an extension of his own body, the tip slicing the captain's thigh in a swift strike that drew blood through the fabric of his trousers. Silas roared in fury, swinging his sword in a savage arc that forced Tasunka back 3 steps. The soldiers moved forward, but the captain barked at them to hold. "He's mine," Silas snarled, ignoring the blood dripping from his thigh. "The savage is mine." Tasunka planted his bare feet in the soil, spear held in guard, eyes never leaving the captain's face. Serafina saw the sweat shining on his painted skin, his muscles taut as drawn bowstrings, his breath steady like a man trained to fight for survival. Silas attacked again, this time with more caution, his sword tracing defensive arcs as he pressed forward. Tasunka moved like a shadow around him, the spear darting, slashing, always in motion, always searching for an opening. Then Silas feigned a high strike and swept his blade low, aiming for Tasunka's legs. Tasunka leapt over the steel, but the moment his feet touched the ground, one of the soldiers, disobeying his captain's orders, fired. The shot tore into Tasunka's left shoulder, hurling him back with brutal force. He struck a tree and collapsed, the spear slipping from his grasp. "No!" Serafina's scream ripped the air like a blade. She rushed to him, falling to her knees, her hands frantic over the wound. Blood gushed hot and crimson between her fingers, the same red he had once painted across her skin. "Tasunka, please, please." Her tears fell onto his chest, mingling with blood and sweat. His eyes opened, meeting hers. He was pale, but conscious. "Serafina, don't speak. Save your strength. Listen." He coughed, blood staining the corner of his lips. "If I die, you won't die. If I die," he continued, weaker now, remember you are strong, that you are sacred, that you deserve love." Silas limped closer, his sword still in hand, his voice dripping with mockery. "Touching, but now the game ends." Serafina turned toward him, and something in her eyes made the captain falter. It wasn't fear, it was fury, primal and ancient, the rage of a mother defending her child and her mate. "If you touch him again," she said, her voice low and dangerous, "I swear on my dead mother's soul I will kill you with my own hands." Silas barked a laugh, though it rang hollow. "You? Kill me? A pregnant woman?" Serafina rose slowly, her hands still soaked in blood, her eyes never leaving his. I am daughter of a midwife, granddaughter of a healer. I know 100 ways to make a man die slow and screaming. I know which roots turn blood to water, which berries rot eyes in their sockets, which leaves make a man beg for death before the sun sets. Something in her tone, in the way she spoke those words, unsettled every man present. Even the soldiers shifted uneasily. Silas tried to laugh again but failed. "You're bluffing. Do you want to find out?" It was then the storm broke. The heavens split open, spilling icy rain over them all. Lightning slashed the sky. Thunder roared like the voices of angry gods. And in the chaos of the sudden tempest, something extraordinary happened. Tasunka, who moments before seemed near death, pushed himself up on his elbows, his eyes burning with renewed strength. It wasn't physical power. It was something deeper, as if the very forest had lent him its spirit. "Seraphina," he said firmly, "put your hands on the earth." "What?" "Place your hands on the ground. Call the spirits. Call your ancestors. Call all who died protecting what they loved." Seraphina didn't fully understand, but she trusted. She knelt in the rising mud, pressing her palms flat into the wet soil. And then it began. The wind shifted suddenly, whipping into the soldiers, sending the horses into a panic. Rain poured so hard it was difficult to see 3 feet ahead. Lightning struck a tree dangerously close to the armed men. But the most terrifying thing came from the forest. Snakes. Dozens of them, sliding from the undergrowth toward the intruders, as if summoned by some ancient call. Horses reared, soldiers cried out, even Silas blanched, his face pale. "Witchcraft!" one soldier shouted. "It's sorcery." "It isn't sorcery," Tasunka said, managing to sit upright against the tree. "It's the forest telling you that you're not welcome here." Soaked, shaken, Silas pointed his sword at Seraphina. "This isn't over, witch. I'll return with more men and with priests, with the army itself if I must." "Come back," Seraphina answered, still on her knees in the mud, her bloodied hands pressed into the earth, her painted face glowing red under the rain. "But remember, this land knows your name now, and if you return with malice it will remember." As if her words had power, another bolt of lightning struck even closer. That was enough. Silas gave the order, and the men spurred their horses, fleeing into the storm and away from mysteries they could not comprehend. When the sound of hooves faded, Seraphina crawled back to Tasunka. He was pale but smiling faintly, the bleeding slowing at last. "How did you do that?" she asked, pressing cloth to his wound. "I did nothing," he whispered. "I only asked my grandmother for help." Seraphina glanced around. The snakes had vanished as suddenly as they'd appeared. The rain was already easing, the forest returning to its natural hush. "She heard you?" Tasunka touched her rain-soaked face with trembling fingers. "She always hears, when it's about protecting family." The next 3 days were the longest of Seraphina's life. Tasunka had lost much blood, and fever came the second night, burning him until he shook with convulsions. Seraphina did not sleep. She barely ate. She never left the cave, relying on the water Tasunka had stored in clay pots, rationing each drop between keeping him hydrated and washing his wound that refused to heal cleanly. On the first night, he spoke to people who weren't there. "Grandmother," he murmured, eyes closed, darting beneath his lids as if watching invisible shapes. "Grandmother, is she safe? Is the baby safe?" Seraphina held his hand, feeling his skin too hot beneath her fingers. "I'm here, Tasunka. We're safe. You protected us." But he continued speaking to ghosts. "I can't leave them, grandmother. I promised to protect them. I promised." On the second night, the fever worsened. He cried out in his sleep, his body racked with spasms, and Seraphina had to hold him down with all her weight. Then she remembered her own grandmother's words, the healer who had died when she was 12. "Wound fever," Seraphina muttered to herself, her hands digging through the bundles of herbs Tasunka had stored. "I need oak bark to cleanse, willow leaves to heal, and—" Her eyes caught a small jar at the back of the collection. "Wild honey to give him strength." She worked through the night, preparing poultices, teas, and salves. Every 2 hours she cleaned the wound, applied warm compresses, and dripped honeyed water onto his parched lips. Her hands trembled with exhaustion, but she never stopped. "Don't leave me," she whispered as she worked. "Please don't leave me alone again. I just learned what it means not to be alone." On the third morning, when sunlight spilled golden through the cave entrance, Tasunka opened his eyes. Not the glazed eyes of fever, but the clear, knowing gaze she loved. "Seraphina." His voice was hoarse, but it was his voice. She collapsed onto his chest, careful not to press the wound, and sobbed like a child. Tears of relief, of gratitude, of fear, transformed into joy. "I thought I'd lost you," she cried against his warm skin. "I thought I'd be alone again." His hands, weak but steady, stroked her hair. "You'll never be alone again," he murmured. "I promised you that, and I promised my grandmother too." She truly came," Tasunka smiled faintly. "She did. She told me it wasn't my time, that I had a family to raise." He paused, his eyes locking with hers. "And she told me you cared for me better than any healer." Serafina pulled back enough to look at him. The wound was still ugly, but no longer bleeding, and the skin around it had lost its angry redness. "I learned from my grandmother. She always said the right hands heal better than the right herbs, and you have the right hands." In the days that followed, as Tasunka recovered, a new intimacy grew between them. Not yet physical. He was too weak, she too heavy with child, but emotional. The intimacy of one who cared and one who was cared for, of two who had seen each other at the edge and had not turned away. Serafina bathed him, carefully washing around the wound. Tasunka brushed her hair in the afternoons, while she sat between his legs so he could rest his back against the cave wall. They spoke of things never shared with another soul. Tasunka told her of the loneliness of his first years in the wilderness, of how he had considered ending his life many times, of how he had learned to find meaning in the smallest things, a plant that survived, an animal that healed, a storm that passed. Serafina spoke of her marriage, not only the abuse but the invisibility, how she had felt like furniture in her own home, used and discarded as needed. "But with you," she said one evening, her head resting on his good shoulder as they watched the sunset bathe the cave entrance in gold, "I feel seen. For the first time, I feel seen." "You are impossible not to see," Tasunka answered, kissing the crown of her head. "You're like the sun. Even if you close your eyes, you still feel the warmth." It was that same evening he asked the question that changed everything. "Serafina, yes, when the baby is born, would you stay here with me forever?" She turned to face him, her heart pounding. "Are you asking me to marry you?" Tasunka hesitated, then smiled, that rare, transforming smile she loved. "I'm asking to be your family, for us to be a family. I don't know how white men do such things, but I know I want to wake every day knowing you are here, the baby is here, that we are an us." Tears stung her eyes, but they were good tears this time. "And where would we live? Silas won't give up. He'll return. Then we'll go farther. I know places in the wilderness no white man can reach, places where we can build our own life, raise our own children, grow old together. Our own children." He flushed slightly. "If you wish. I know this child is not mine by blood, but he is already mine in my heart. And if you want more," she silenced him with a kiss. Not the desperate, fleeting kiss they had shared before the battle, but a true kiss, slow, saying everything words could not. When they parted, both were crying. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes to everything. Yes to forever." Outside, as if blessing their vow, the wind stirred the trees, and the young apple seedlings Tasunka had planted swayed gently in the evening breeze. Their child was born on a midnight of full moon, when the stars glittered like diamonds scattered across black velvet sky. The pains began at sunset. Waves Serafina recognized at once. She had helped her mother welcome many children when she was a girl. "It's time," she told Tasunka, who was preparing supper. He dropped the clay pot, shattering it on the cave floor, but seemed not to notice. He only stared at her wide-eyed. "Time? Now? Here?" "Babies come when they want," Serafina said with a small smile, even as another contraction gripped her belly. "And this one has decided he wants to be born at home." In the hours that followed, Tasunka revealed a calm competence she had never imagined. He boiled water, arranged clean cloths, prepared herbal teas to give her strength. When the contractions grew fierce, he sat behind her, offering his body for support, whispering encouragement in his native tongue. "What are you saying?" Serafina asked between waves of pain. "I'm telling him about the world waiting for him," Tasunka answered, his hands massaging her tense shoulders. "About the trees he will climb, the rivers he will swim, the animals he will know. And if it's a girl, then I'll tell her about the flowers she'll gather, the bird's nests she'll discover, the songs the wind will teach her." The labor was long, but not troubled. Serafina leaned on Tasunka's strength when she needed it, walked the cave when the pain allowed, breathed as her mother had taught her. Tasunka never left her side, offering water, wiping sweat from her brow, murmuring ancestral prayers. When the moment came to push, Serafina knelt on soft pelts, Tasunka's hands clasping hers, his voice giving her the strength for the final effort. "I see the head," he cried, his voice breaking with emotion. "Serafina, I see our baby." With a cry that blended pain and triumph, Serafina brought her son into the world. He was small but perfect, skin golden as honey, hair dark as night, and when his eyes opened for the first time, they were deep and steady like the man who held him. "A boy," Tasunka whispered, tears streaming freely down his face. "A little warrior." Serafina reached out, and Tasunka laid the newborn on her chest. The child stopped crying at once, as if he recognized the heartbeat that had lulled him for months. "Hello, my love," Serafina murmured, kissing his tiny forehead. "Welcome to our family." Tasunka lay down beside them, one arm wrapping around Serafina, his free hand gently touching the baby's clenched fist. When the infant opened his hand and grasped Tasunka's finger, the warrior sobbed aloud. "He accepts me," he whispered in wonder. "You are his father," Serafina answered simply. "Not by blood, but by choice. And that is stronger than blood." They stayed awake the rest of the night, taking turns holding the baby, marveling at every small sound he made, every twitch, every fleeting expression across his perfect little face. At sunrise, Tasunka rose and fetched the necklace he had crafted months before, the one made of small animal teeth polished smooth. With infinite care, he placed it around the child's neck. "Now he is protected," he murmured, kissing the boy's head, "by the spirits, by the ancestors, and by us both." Serafina watched, her heart overflowing with a happiness she had never thought possible. Here was everything she had longed for without even knowing it. A man who loved her not in spite of her scars but because of them. A child who would be raised in love, not obligation. A family built on choice, not imposed by society. "Tasunka?" "Yes? What shall we call him?" "The name we chose," Tasunka smiled. "Erindor. In my grandmother's tongue it means new dawn, because that is what he is. Our new dawn. Erindor Wapasha," Serafina repeated, the name settling perfectly over the baby in her arms. "Our family has a name now." In the weeks that followed, they learned to be parents together. Serafina nursed Erindor, while Tasunka sang lullabies in his ancestral language. Tasunka changed cloth wrappings made from soft fibers, while Serafina prepared poultices for the baby's healing belly button. They traded night watches, one sleeping while the other soothed the child. Erindor was a peaceful baby, as though born knowing he was safe. He cried only when hungry or needing to be changed, spent long hours gazing at the cave wall's painted symbols, and laughed when Tasunka made funny faces at him. "He has your eyes," Serafina said one afternoon, watching Tasunka cradle the boy. "And your mouth," Tasunka answered. "And your stubbornness too. See how he clings when he doesn't want to let go." It was true. Erindor had a grip astonishingly strong for a baby, whether clutching Serafina's finger, a lock of Tasunka's hair, or the feather that dangled from his protective necklace. "He will be strong," Serafina said proudly. "He will need to be," Tasunka replied more soberly. "The world beyond is not kind to children like him." They both knew it. Erindor would always live between two worlds, neither fully white nor fully Sioux. He would be judged, questioned, perhaps rejected by both sides. "Then we will teach him to be strong enough never to need anyone's approval," Serafina said firmly. "We'll teach him that family is not blood. It is choice. That home is not a place. It's where you are loved as you are." Tasunka kissed her brow, then the baby's. "And we'll teach him that some loves are so great, they turn two broken souls into a whole family." Outside, the young apple trees Tasunka had planted were budding with new leaves, small green signs that life always finds a way to bloom, even in the unlikeliest of places. 5 years later, the apple tree had grown taller than either of them expected, its branches spreading wide to cast generous shade over the new home Tasunka had built with his own hands. No longer just a cave in the rock, now it was a true house, crafted from timber and clay with 2 rooms, a wide kitchen, and a porch where Serafina often sat sewing in the afternoons. Erindor ran barefoot through the trees, chasing butterflies with the seriousness of a hunter. At 5 years old he was strong and curious, his skin bronzed by the sun, his dark hair forever tousled by his adventures in the woods. He spoke 2 tongues with ease. The English Serafina had taught him, and the ancestral language learned from Tasunka, and he treated both cultures as if they had always been one. "Mother," he called, running toward the porch with something in his hand. "Look what I found." Serafina raised her eyes from the tiny shirt she was stitching for the baby girl due in a few months, and smiled at her son. Erindor held a smooth golden stone that gleamed in the sunlight. "It's beautiful, my love. Where did you find it?" "By the creek, where Father's fishing. He said I could make a necklace for the baby with it." Her heart ached with tenderness. Tasunka had been taking Erindor on his daily expeditions ever since the boy could walk, teaching him about plants, animals, the forest secrets, and always he spoke of the sister yet to come, making sure Erindor felt part of something greater. "It will be a wonderful gift," she said, pulling him into a hug. "She will love it. Do you think she'll play with me?" "I'm sure she will, but it will take time. Babies are very small at first." Erindor nodded solemnly, then dashed back into the woods in search of new adventures. Serafina returned to her sewing, her eyes drifting across the homestead. 5 years. 5 years since that stormy night when everything changed. Sometimes it still felt like a dream, the simple, complete life she had built with Tasunka, the peace she had found far from the judging eyes of the so-called civilized world. Silas never returned, despite his threats. Later, through passing traders, they learned he had been killed in an ambush 3 years earlier. Serafina felt no joy at the news, only distant relief, one less shadow over her family. "What are you thinking?" Tasunka's voice pulled her back. He was walking toward the house with a large fish in hand, smiling, with Erindor proudly carrying a small fishing rod, fashioned just for him. "I caught one too," Erindor announced proudly, holding up a small but respectable fish. "Father says I can clean it myself." "Carefully," Serafina warned, though she was smiling. Tasunka climbed onto the porch and leaned down to kiss her, a soft kiss that still sent butterflies through her stomach after all these years. "I was remembering," she answered his earlier question, "how we got here." "A long journey," Tasunka agreed, settling beside her, watching their son focus intently on cleaning his fish. "Do you regret any of it?" He looked at her in surprise. "Regret? Why?" "For giving up an easier life, for choosing a woman with a heavy past, a complicated woman with a child. Not your own." Tasunka cupped her face in both hands, his gaze steady and fierce. "Serafina Wapasha," he said, using the name she had chosen when they bound themselves as husband and wife before the spirits of the forest. "You gave me a family. You gave me purpose. You gave me a love I never knew was possible. How could I regret the best thing that ever happened to me?" Tears stung Serafina's eyes, not of sorrow but of happiness so full it hurt. "And you gave me a home," she whispered. "You showed me I was worthy of love. You taught me that family isn't fate, it's choice." They sat in comfortable silence, watching Erindor finally succeed in cleaning his fish before rushing over, his face alight with pride. Later that night, after Erindor had fallen asleep in his small bed, Serafina and Tasunka sat outside beneath the branches of the great apple tree. "Remember when you planted those seeds?" she asked, resting her hand on her rounded belly, where new life grew. "I remember. You told me I was planting hope, and you did. Look what it became." His eyes followed hers, taking in the house they had built, the child they had raised, the life carved out together in the wilderness. "Hope bore fruit," he agreed. That night, Serafina woke to find Erindor restless, staring through the little window Tasunka had built. "Can't sleep, my love," she whispered. "Mother," Erindor said softly, "why don't some people like us?" The question struck like a knife. He was still young but not blind. He had noticed the stares of the rare travelers who passed, heard whispers of strange families and half-blood children. She lay down beside him, pulling him close. "You see, my love, some people fear what they don't understand, and when they're afraid they can be cruel. But we're not bad. No, we're not. We're different, and that scares some people. But do you know what matters more than their fear? What? That we are a family, that we love one another, that we care for each other. The rest is just noise." He was quiet for a while. "Does Father think so too? Father thinks you're the bravest, smartest boy in the world, and so do I. And the baby, will she like me, even though I'm different?" Serafina smiled in the dark. "My heart, to your little sister, you'll be the greatest brother in the world. She'll want to be just like you." Erindor nestled closer. "So it's okay to be different." "It's more than okay. It's perfect." When he finally drifted to sleep, Serafina remained awake, one hand on her son, the other on the life within her. Tasunka appeared at the doorway, woken by the instinct of a father. "Is everything all right?" he asked softly. "It is," she answered. "It's perfectly all right." And it was true. In that simple home built beneath a tree, grown from seeds of hope, surrounded by a love that had turned two broken souls into a whole family. Everything was exactly as it should be. Outside, the wind whispered through the apple leaves, telling old stories to those willing to listen, and among those stories was a new one, the story of Serafina and Tasunka, of Erindor and the sister yet to come, of how true love can bloom in the most impossible places and create miracles that endure. The stars shone like divine approval over the little family that had dared defy the world to find happiness. And somewhere among the trees, the spirit of an old grandmother smiled, knowing her prayers had been answered. Her grandson would never be alone again. 20 years later, the apple tree had become legend in the region. People said it was the largest ever seen, that its fruit healed body and soul, that beneath its shade stories were born that touched the hearts of all who listened. Serafina, now 50, with silver strands woven into her dark hair and eyes carrying the wisdom of a life fully lived, sat under the tree each afternoon. Around her, there were always children, her own, her grandchildren, children from nearby families, and little travelers who came with passing merchants. Erindor had grown into a strong, respected man, married to a gentle woman who had journeyed from afar just to meet the family of the enchanted tree, as they were called. He now had children of his own, little ones who ran laughing among the roots just as he once had. Their daughter, Alenia, had grown into a striking young woman with a heart even more radiant than her beauty, helping her mother care for the children while learning the secrets of healing herbs. And there were others, 2 boys and another girl, all raised with the same unconditional love, all taught that family is something built every day through acts of love. Tasunka, his hair now white but his body still strong at 60, continued to fish, hunt and tend the land that had sheltered them. But his greatest joy was watching Serafina tell stories to the children, seeing in their wide, bright eyes the same wonder he had felt when he first listened to her voice. "Grandmother Serafina," said a little girl who had arrived that day with a caravan of traders, "tell us again the story of the woman who came in the rain." Serafina smiled, pulling the child close. "Once upon a time," she began, her voice soft but steady, "on a night of terrible storm, a lost and pregnant woman found shelter in the cave of a man who had long forgotten what it meant not to be alone." And as she told the story, for the 1000th time, always as if it were the first, Serafina's eyes found Tasunka's across the yard. He was watching her with the same love he had shown since the beginning, a love that started with protection and grew into the foundation upon which an entire family had blossomed. The children pressed closer during the frightening parts, cheered when the villains were defeated, and sighed with relief when the tale ended with, "and they lived happily ever after." "Is it really true, Grandma?" asked one of the little ones. "Did it really happen?" Serafina looked around, at the big warm home they had built, at the children and grandchildren scattered through the garden, at Tasunka walking closer with a smile, at the enormous apple tree whose branches stretched wide to shelter them. "What do you think, my heart?" she asked, kissing the child's forehead. "Look around you. What is truth and what is story?" The child's eyes widened with wonder. "It's all true," the little voice whispered, as if discovering a precious secret. "It's all true," Serafina confirmed. That evening, as the sun dipped low and painted the sky in rose and gold, the family gathered for supper. 5 children, 9 grandchildren, Serafina and Tasunka, all seated around a long wooden table hewn from the very forest that had once sheltered them. As always, before eating, they joined hands. Tasunka spoke the prayer he had created years earlier. "We give thanks to the spirits who led 2 lost souls to one another. We give thanks to the storm that brought Serafina to my door. We give thanks for the love that turned a lonely cave into a home filled with laughter. And we give thanks for each other, for choosing every single day to be a family." "Family," they echoed together, voices imperfect, yet perfect in harmony. That night, after the children were asleep, Serafina and Tasunka walked hand in hand to the apple tree. Its roots had spread so wide they nearly covered the yard, as if the tree itself meant to embrace and protect everything that had grown beneath it. "Remember when you said you were planting hope?" Tasunka asked, leaning against the great trunk. "I remember. You thought I was being dramatic." He laughed, still that low, rich laugh that made her smile. "You were right. You planted hope, and it grew into far more than I ever imagined." Serafina nestled into his arms, fitting against his chest as perfectly as she had decades earlier. "No," she whispered, "we planted hope, together, and look what we've harvested." They fell silent, listening to the night sounds, crickets, the rustle of leaves, the faint laughter of a grandchild still awake somewhere inside. Tasunka? Thank you. For what? For opening that door on a stormy night. For seeing me when I was just a broken woman in the rain. For teaching me that I deserved to be loved. He kissed the crown of her head, as he had every night for 25 years. And thank you for teaching me that solitude wasn't my destiny, for turning my cave into a home, for making me a father, a grandfather, a whole man. And so, beneath the tree they had planted with hope and watered with love, two people once rejected by the world quietly celebrated the miracle they had built together. A family proving that some love stories are so powerful they can rewrite destiny itself. The last thing they saw before returning inside was a shooting star blazing across the sky, as if the universe were blessing once more the union born of a storm and grown into a lineage of love that would endure for generations. Some loves truly do last forever, some encounters truly do change everything, and some trees planted in hope truly do become homes where all may find shelter. The story of Serafina and Tasunka proves that no matter how broken we arrive in this world, there is always a chance to find someone who sees our light, even when we've forgotten it ourselves. If this story has touched your heart, subscribe to our channel, leave a like and share it with someone who needs to be reminded that every sad ending can be the beginning of a story of redemption.